Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday, the 3rd of November 2021. Coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7RP. Great to see you. On tonight's show, Phil Holt, the Doc, G4LPP, shows us how to have some fun with homemade linears for 6 metres and higher. And here is a serious book on Morse code with a section on semaphore. And we find out what on earth is this. Now we've had lots of entries, and I have to say this week we've had more varied entries and guesses on this than anything else we think we've ever done. But if you think you know, you can pop it onto Facebook or on BATC now, and we will read it out when we get all the other answers. But I'm sorry that I need to start with some somber news. As you may have seen in last weekend's newsletter, Terry G4PSH is now silent key. Terry was a well-known amateur in Norfolk, particularly well known for his very active roles in Rainet and Air Cadets, as well as his commitment in running GB2 RAF at the Air Defence Museum at RAF Niedersheim, which was operating until just a few months ago, in fact the 30th of August this year. Now, we don't have any details of Terry's funeral yet, but if you would like to know the details when we do, please drop me an email and I'll let you know. And now we have some further sad news, I'm afraid. Bill White, M0HHW, has also fallen silent key in the last few days. It's been a while since Bill came to our club, but he was a very avid constructor, memorably engineering a wonderful magnetic loop antenna some years ago, and made such an impression that he won our Koblenz trophy when he first joined the club. There you see him holding the trophy there. And it's not just human friends we've lost this week, because our own Steve G3AVA lost his beloved canine companion Cody at the weekend. Now, if you've not had a family pet, you may not understand quite how important losing a pet can be, but if you have, then you'll know they can be much as part of family as anyone can be. And Steve was happy that we share this picture to remember Cody here, because many of you knew Cody through Steve. It's just 2 weeks tomorrow that the first ICNA regulations come into force, where it's mandatory for you with the new license conditions to do an assessment of your station if you transmit on 110 megahertz or higher. Now, we have gone into that quite a lot in the club. Also, the RSGB have done a lot, both in articles, online and in webinars. And we had our own webinar with our own EMC committee of Mike and Tony earlier in the year, as well as Steve. Well, those three will be back to help next week, next Wednesday on NARC Live. It's an interactive, which will be with Zoom. So as well as the four of us there, you will be invited as well to join us on Zoom with your issues, your queries, your problems, because next Wednesday, of course, there'll just be 1 week before it comes into force on Thursday, the 18th of November. Now, we're not trying to scare you here. We've tried to inform you all the way along. And don't worry that this is going to be something that you can't deal with. But you should pay attention. And to anybody who says, oh, well, you'll be all right because it's high up there, or you're only running 10 or 15 watts, it's not really the case. You still need to do an assessment. Even if you do only run a few milliwatts or watts, you need to have done something about it. But an awful lot more has been done since we first visited this a good 6 months ago. So that's what we're doing next Wednesday. It's live. And also, in fact, our guest tonight, G4LPP Phil, who's quite experienced with VHF antennas and things, he'll be here to help us as well as Steve, Mike and Tony. So I hope you'll join us for that next week. And remember, it's an interactive as well. So if you'd like to come on and ask your questions and things, you'll be able to do that too. Just a little bit of news now. John 2E0TWQ says, just a bit of news on the bans from Tuesday lunchtime. That was yesterday, 11:55. He says he's just been on the radio. SSB 17 metres on a frequency of 18150. And he was hearing 9K2JJ in Kuwait on S5 and R5, send and receive 5. This was on his Flex 3000 SDR and his Sigma HF360 vertical. There's more information on his antenna on his website. There's quite a long address, so I'm not going to read his website, but we'll pop it in the newsletter soon as well. He said he kept trying, but he couldn't break through the pile-up from Europe. So thanks for letting us know about that, John. And then finally, this picture of this book, Tammy. Can we show this here? Because this was actually from Steve G4LPP. And he says that Carol bought me a useful book today, but he wants Roger to know that you shouldn't be getting any ideas about learning Morse, Roger. I love the section on semaphore, being a bit of a railway nut. When as soon as I saw that, I kept thinking semaphore signals, but of course that could
flags,
be arms, isn't it? Flags or arms and things like that, yeah. So there we are. If you're really dedicated, maybe you've done your Morse, then you want to add a bit of spice to that. Semaphore might be the way.
It'll never catch on.
Don't you think? What Morse or semaphore? Don't say that here. I don't think we'll... I check your tyres when you go out. Anyway, let's hand over to Tammy now and find out what's happening with her little people.
Okay, here's the little people for this week.
I haven't seen it.
There's a few people I know that will actually cry at this.
I think so. You're one of them.
Yeah.
Wrong flavour though, I think. Oh.
It's called Making a Tunnel.
Of course.
So having to chip away at the Pringles to make the tunnel.
I know someone who would help clear that up, that mess at the front.
That's right.
Don't you?
I do too.
You wouldn't need a lorry either.
And they are watching, I believe.
There we are. Look at that lovely ingenuity and imagination there. As always, miniature-calendar.com is where you can find that and lots of other pictures as well. It's a lovely one, Tammy. Makes me feel hungry though. I haven't had my meal yet. Anyway. Lots more before the meal, that's for sure. So what have you been doing? Do keep in touch. Drop us a line at the usual address. It's radio@dcpmicro.com. If you can send it to us by Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we'll try and include it on that show or one very, very soon afterwards. And we do love to hear your stories, your pictures and everything. As you can see, it just helps us all keep in touch. So now we're going to go to that competition and ask, do you know what on earth is this?
I still think it looks like an angry bird or a dinosaur.
No, you do. Oh, a dinosaur. Yeah. I suppose a sort of seagull. I still keep thinking, baby shark. That one. I keep thinking of that. I don't know why. Anyway, what did you think it was? Have we got anybody guessing, by the way?
I don't think we have.
I don't know what Tony M0TDK's been drinking, but I'll have some of that, please, because he's put a lot of messages that I don't really understand. While his horse in silence chomped the grass of the forest ferny floor, the time has come, the walrus said.
Well, I think you need to start at the beginning.
Oh,
and is anybody there? Said the traveller, knocking on the moonlit door, while his horse in silence chomped the grass of the forest ferny floor.
The time has come, the walrus said. We'll never know
anyway,
the rest. Anyway, yeah.
Shall we get back to this?
What is it now? What is that?
All right, we've got two on here. We've
okay.
got Gary Austin, who's in Staffordshire, says he thinks it might be a bag sealer. And then John 20TWQ thinks it might be a Star Wars helmet.
Oh, I suppose, yeah, one of those stormtrooper type.
Yeah.
Cool. Could be a strange. Okay. Well, this is what you sent to us. I said, it's been the most diverse range of guesses that I think we've ever seen for a guess of one of these things. I'll start at the top. These are the order, more or less, that they came in. Steve G4EVA says, is it a Dymo label machine? Now, Lynn Kirk at call sign, I think M0SOON maybe. I'll get killed for that. Thinks it's a bag sealer. Do you want to read some out, Tammy?
Yeah, Paul G3VPT. Is it a stapler thing for paper or an office hole punch?
Sam Gadsby, one of our bright sparks, thinks it's a toenail clipper. You have to have small toes to fit in there.
Doug 20YWP says, is it a bag sealer or some kind of sealer?
That's the theme coming through here. Nev M0NFY says, is it a sewing machine? Yeah,
Oh, I have seen a little
yes,
sewing machine
I have.
thing like that before, yeah.
I see. Yeah, okay.
Simon M0SIH, it's a stapleless stapler used to join paper together without using metal staples.
Bob GSTU says, my guess is it's a paper hole punch. Roy...
Yeah, you go.
You want me to?
I'm going to
Sorry.
cough, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Tammy. Roy G8IXM says, I think this week's item is a staple-free paper clipper or stapler, which uses a novel way of creating and folding a tab through paper. That was Roy G8IXM.
Rodney G0CBO, is it a handheld device for sealing plastic bags?
Okay, Colin M0GMK says, I think this is a special shaped hole punch for sheets inserted in a loose leaf notebook.
John 2E0TWQ, could it be a type of bag sealer?
Online I can see Paul Brooks has said, is it a hole punch? So we're getting, they're sort of all on a theme now. John M6JAU says he thinks it's a staplerless stapler. It cuts and folds the paper sheets to lock them together without the need for actual metal staples.
John G8VP, I think the mystery object is a model of a spaceship and Tammy's little people are safe inside. I think I'm losing the plot. Clueless.
Yes. Okay, John, have a rest. Have a rest, mate. Okay. And Tony M0TDK says, I think this week's mystery object is a stapler that presses pages together rather than using metal staplers. So, Tammy, what a big range of things and guesses.
It is, yeah.
Hole punches, I suppose bag sealers, and stapler staplers was the guess. So, what is it, Tammy? Please reveal. What on earth is this?
It is a staple-free stapler. And
Cool.
the one thing on the right is what it does. So
Okay.
it makes a little hole and then tucks it under to hold things together.
And that was from Nick, M0HGU.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that, Nick. Really got people thinking that, didn't it? I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
In fact, so great, Kemi. Can you come to me?
Yeah.
Oh, my special drawer.
I know what's coming.
You saw me order it, didn't you? I was so curious. I thought this was a very eco thing, and we're all very much aware of eco things at the moment with the news. So I thought I'd buy one. Actually, you can put it on one, and then this is it. What it looks like. Okay, it is Japanese, as you can tell. I've never opened this, so it's a true unboxing.
Is it?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll do it over there, that camera. Okay, so this is it. This is Harinax, which I think is one of the ones that we saw. And it's not quite the same as Paul's one.
Would you like to staple my script together?
Well, no, because you won't be able to read the rest of it. Let me script a couple of bits of script from the other night here. So this is, honestly, I've never used one of these before. Do you want to go to one?
A live demo.
And then we'll do a demo. This is probably going to go very wrong here. Here we go. I haven't even read the instructions, but radio amateurs, do we read instructions? Never. Here we go. I'm going to just put these in here, and I promise you this was... Right, here we go. Oh, look. It does work. See that? And neat. Actually, the other side. Oh, I see how clever that really is, because it's sort of passed it through. Can you see that? That's really neat, actually. It's not just a sort of push it in thing. Anyway, Nick, thank you very much. I think if anybody wants to get shares in these things, just...
Yeah, can I make a plea to everybody, please? Can you stop sending weird and wonderful things on the what on earth is this? Because he's just buying everything every week. He's like, oh, well, I haven't got one of those. Think about buy it. And then we can show it on the show on Wednesday night.
And it'll never get used. I know what you're going to say. Maybe they could possibly an unusual view of a radio, then maybe I'd have to buy the radio. No, all right, I won't get away with that.
No.
Okay, moving swiftly on.
Yes.
Let's have a look and see what the new object is when we ask, what on earth is this? Now, you have a close look at that. If you've got this on an iPad or a Mac or not Mac, a tablet or something like that, or some close-up screen, have a good look at that object at the top. We will, of course, be putting this on our Facebook page and on the newsletter as well, because I can certainly suggest that it's worth a good look at that, especially if you're an engineering type person and you know how things work. Have a good look at that. That might give you a clue. I think this is ingenious. If you know what that is, drop us an email to that address on the screen at the bottom of your screen now, by 3 o'clock next Wednesday. That's the latest, but do it soon if you know what that is. And we will reveal all next Wednesday night on NARC Live. Fascinating.
Have you got one?
I've got one. No, I haven't got one of those, no.
Are you going to buy one?
That isn't in the script. No, I don't think I'll be buying one of those.
No.
But we'll see. I mustn't talk about it because I know what it does, or what it's for, or what it is. And that would give it away. So we better move on. Let's just time before we reach our main event tonight to say what is happening at the club this coming week. On Sunday at 7 o'clock on GB3MB, we've got the GB2RS News with Mike G4D1C. On Monday, the 8th of November, we've got the Monday Night Net at 7:30, hosted this week by Ken M0KJW, and at 8:30, the 80-metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. And next Wednesday, here on NARC Live, on the 10th, as you know, because we mentioned it a little while ago, it's an interactive night. So we'd love you to join us for that. Of course, if you can't join us on Zoom, or you'd rather not, then you can still enter questions and things like that on Facebook and BATC. But this is one of those nights, I think, which will be good to be interactive, and you can ask questions of the EMC guys, Steve, and also Phil's going to be around as well to help on that. So remember, 110 megs and up. If you transmit on that, you should at least do an assessment. I strongly commend you to do that, not just think, oh, someone said that if you run only 10 watts, you don't need it. Have a look at it anyway, and we'll be there to help you next week. That's what clubs should be there for. And of course, don't forget to let us know if you know anybody who would. We've actually sent 2 of these this week. It's a NARC card, which is there to cheer anybody up, should they wish. And if you just send us your name, we will add your name to ours and send it off to anyone, anywhere in the world. And it really does cheer people up, I can assure you, from the little bits of feedback that we get back. So please keep in touch with that, as well as all your stories and pictures and everything else. So now we come to tonight's main event. And I think it's not something that we tend to do enough of, maybe, is construction. Okay, I'm into electronics, but I know many of you are as well. But it seems to be the sort of fashion now that most people buy things ready-made. Well, someone who really loves the construction side of the hobby is with us tonight, and he's going to show us how you can have real fun making your own linear amplifiers for 6 meters and up. So it's really great to welcome Phil G4LPP to NARC Live. Hello, Phil.
Yep, hello there.
Good to see you.
Yes, and you?
Sorry it's taken a little while to get there, but these staplers and things, you have to show them, you know. So what are you going to talk to us about tonight? What are you going to show us tonight?
Well, I decided it was a good idea to get a bit more power out on the VHF bands and upwards. I've been trying to join in the UK ACs and so on from here, and having great trouble getting heard. So I decided power was needed, and not being super rich, I thought I'd try and do it on a bit of a budget, and so I'll make my own.
Excellent. Well, we're really looking forward to it tonight. As always, you've seen, I'm sure, many NARC Lives now, you can ask questions of Phil at any time, either during or straight afterwards, and we'll read them to Phil either on BATC or on Facebook. Well, I'm going to hand back to Phil now. We'll get his slides and presentation, and then we'll have time for some questions at the end. So over to you again, Phil.
Okay. Right. So I entitled this Fun with Homebrew Linears with a slight bit of irony in the background. It's been quite an interesting project over the last about 2.5 years, and I've had ups and downs with it. But the biggest thing is that actually, in the end, they've proved remarkably successful. So I'll take you through the reasons for doing it again, and also how we did it as best as I can, without going into too much detail, unless you want to see that, in which case ask. So this was the problem I was facing, having moved from sort of roughly the centre of southern England down in Stevenage way, where I had absolutely no point trying to use the bands because of high noise levels. I thought I'll go somewhere that's really low in noise and really good for reception, and should be able to work a lot from here. And promptly found that nobody on VHF and up beams towards Norfolk, or did, unless they're beaming across us to get to the continent, in which case your signals are there, but nobody's interested in working us because the DX is beyond us. So it's been an interesting situation. I was storing in the 2 meter UKAC when I first started about 13 to 15 stations running 50 watts from the FT991. Same antenna I'm using now, which is an old Tonner from the 1970s, 9-element. And so I was a bit unhappy with that. I thought, no, we need to do better than this. So anyway, the solution presented itself, or part of it anyway. So these are the very scruffy looking amplifiers, but what's inside works, that's the main thing. So running full legal limit gives a chance for people to copy something from here on the side of their beams and then turn them this way for a contact. So that was the theory. So I started off with 2 meters, as that's my favourite band. Had little or no knowledge of the technology. It had changed a lot in the 32 years that I'd been fairly inactive with family and work commitments. So I had to do quite a lot of research into just what sort of technology was there and how I could exploit it. And I very happily stumbled across W6PQL's site, which I'm sure some of you know. It's absolutely stuffed with information about building linears, amongst other things, for pretty well all the VHF bands right the way up and into SHF. And really, he does provide kits, and he does provide good designs and good advice. So that was it. I found that a good starting point and decided to base my first one on his designs. But I didn't want to order everything from him because it is moderately expensive. It's not too bad, but I thought I could do better. So I went on eBay and browsed around to look for a amplifier deck. And lo and behold, I found one. And then I looked at it closely and it turned out to be one of his. So that was a good start. I also had to find an LDMOS of the right type. So this was the one I chose, basically because it had lots of overhead and would let me run full legal without breaking sweat, hopefully. It's as you see, a BLF 188XR, and it's a sort of fairly granddaddy of LDMOSes for this sort of thing. It will run up to 1.4 kilowatts. The supply voltage is 50 volts. And one of the good things about it is it's supposed to be remarkably tolerant of abuse. So, as I say here, so this was the palette, the PCB, the coils, the heat sink. It generates quite a lot of heat. It's not the most efficient device. People do claim about sort of 70+% efficiency, but actually a lot of that turns out to be in harmonics. And the actual power out on the band you want is probably less than half of what you're putting into it. Yeah, it does need quite a lot of heat sinking. I'm very grateful to Steve, 2E0SZD, who helped by milling the copper. It's a nasty job milling copper. As some of you may know, it tends to sort of bind your drill bits and your routers and so on. And he was very experienced with this and has a nice machine in his garage which does the job, and produced me two, one for this amplifier and one for a subsequent one on 70, which is pretty well exactly the same design for the copper spreader. I got the copper as a lump off eBay for about 50 quid for it, so 25 quid per amplifier, because it was long enough to cut in half. And Paul ZBA found in his attic the blue heatsink, which is actually a bit bigger than that, and was for a mains voltage inverter from 12 volts, which he'd got lying in his attic, non-functional. I did add the finned bit of heatsink to the bottom of it to try and help, and in fact this has not really proven to be enough. The amplifier works, but it won't run for for any length of time at the full 400 watts. It's long enough. I'll come around to that later on, and I did have to make some modifications to get it to be satisfactory, which it now is. It's very usable. So there we go. Oh yes, I'll just step back. If you notice, the the LD MOS is actually soldered directly onto the copper heat spreader, which, as you can see, is quite thick. The LD MOS is remarkably tolerant, and what I did was put solder paste in the groove there, and put the chip in it with a temperature sensor probe sort of alongside to make sure it didn't go too hot, and just stuck it on the gas ring. And I took it up to a temperature to melt the solder paste, which was relatively low, I think about 160. And it sank into it, just leaving enough space for the circuit boards to go under the tabs. And that's set very nicely in place. So the coax for the coils is PTFE based, so it will stand both the soldering and it will stand running the power as well without melting. The only worry with PTFE is that if it does overheat and start to fry, the gases are toxic that come off it, but that's another matter. We'll move on. The low-pass filter I also sourced from W6PQL. In fact, what he does is produce a generic low-pass filter board, which you can then tune to whichever band you choose to run it on. So certainly I've used the same one on in all three of my amplifiers, just with different filter components in there, and it seems to work extremely well. I've not had any complaints or issues with the poorly suppressed harmonics. So bits and pieces. The left-hand side's the front panel, as it was originally. The round holes are for air exit. With this amp, I have the air coming in the back through the 4 fans you can see there, and going out the front here, running along the heatsink, and also across the top of the heatsink. It's not ideal. It does work. That's the main thing. These are 7-segment things, which indicators, which actually give quite a nice graphical display of the forward and reverse power. The most useful thing actually is the forward one to show it's working, and the backward one to show that nothing's gone wrong with the antenna or the feed while you're running it. I'll try and talk a bit more about that later. This is the control board, which again was supplied by W6PQL as a kit. They're all surface mounted components. He does send it with these chips already mounted on it, these 2 chips, but everything else you have to do yourself. And some of you may shy away from that a bit, but actually with the solder paste, all you do is sort of smear it on, balance the components in the right place, and then run a heat gun over it. And the solder, as long as the board and the components are nice and clean, the solder just blobs around the ends, and the components center up nicely on the tabs, and when it's dry, it looks like that. When it cools down, rather, it looks like that. So I found it quite an easy job, really. I do have a temperature controlled hot air gun. And in fact, that's how I did this one. We're just doing bits, at a time. Did a sort of a corner, and then another bit, and then another bit until it was complete. But I have also got a flatbed unit, which I probably would try using in the future. But that does involve putting pretty well all the components in place at once and then heating it up. I can't really see why you couldn't do that though. So the fans on the back are low noise. And they run from the 50-volt supply by placing them in series, and they seem to be quite happy with that. It does go through the control board, which controls the speed of the fans. There's also a provision on this control board for switching a preamp with sequencing, but I didn't trust it when I looked at the design, and I put a separate sequencer in, which does seem to work very well. Case I got from eBay. It's relatively small. You can see behind me over my shoulder here. That's a 70 centimeter amp, so it's not huge. That's a KW2000 sitting behind it for scale. anyway, so £35 for that, and that's worked all right. And I used the same case, as you can see. Oh, that's the same case for the 70 centimetre amplifier as well. It was the largest I could find at a reasonable cost. It's quite useful in it. It's got an internal shelf which you can run a lot of the interconnecting leads beneath, keep them away from the RF.
If you don't mind me as well adding in here, Phil, just to tell everybody at home that you've done a lovely page of links for a lot of the projects and things. And of course, we'll be including that on our newsletter afterwards. So if you're interested in where you get any of these things, Phil has already done all these links for us, and we'll include that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So this is at a later stage of construction, still with the 2 metre one. You can see the filter board stuck up on the side there. The fans, as you can see, they mostly blow over the top and miss the point. There were some cooling issues. What I did in the future, or later on, was put in a piece of thick card, angled down. I've just gone the wrong way. So angled down, which directs most of the cooling underneath. I'd still left a bit over the top. It does seem to help to cool the top surface as well. And also a bit of cooling's needed to run past the filter board, because that gets quite warm. As you might imagine, it's filtering out some quite energetic harmonics. The other thing was that for current and voltage monitoring on this amp, I quite successfully used, again off eBay, just a current and voltage digital meter. I had issues with using the same one on 70 centimeters, but I'll come to that. Drive power from the rig goes in through this socket here, which, as you can see, is not connected at the moment, and then goes into this relay here, and then it either goes directly through to this relay here and then out of that socket on receive, or it goes into this attenuator, which is a 13 dB attenuator. And the reason for that is that you only need 2.5 watts of drive to push 1.4 kilowatts out of this with 50 volts on it. So, and as my FT991 has a minimum power of 5 watts and a maximum of 50 watts, some attenuation was needed. And that seems to be just about right, to be quite honest. What other things can we see here of interest? That was a temperature sensor on the left there, which goes into the control board, and it will sort of reduce the power by adjusting the bias. Basically, it reduces the power that the amp's producing and keeps it from getting too hot. But actually, as we've already said, that isn't 100% successful. It does seem to protect the amp anyway. Moving on. So this again, later construction, as the wiring starts to look a bit more bird's nesty. I've used a fair few ferrites, mainly on the things that go from the main compartment into here and vice versa. But as I say, this is building it a little step at a time. It really wasn't too difficult. There's a large power connector here, which will run the high current and high voltage in, and there's relays, which are actually a pair of car 30 amp relays, which switch the main power on and off. They're very useful for isolating it. I've not had any trouble with RF feedback on this amplifier at all, getting into the control circuitry. It's been very, very robust from that point of view. So the ferriting seems to have been enough. We'll move on. The power supply was going to be a problem. I was quite worried about getting something that would produce enough power and be silent and successful. But I was reading around and I found these HP server power supplies. This one I got off eBay for about £50. It's 50 volts at 50 amps. Does have a little bit of 12 volts on it as well, but I haven't used that. There's a lot of information on the web, and I've provided links for that as well, as to how to convert them to run more silently, and how to get them to fire up in the first place. But it's a fairly large thing. It's probably, if you look at Jim's old TS850 there, it's a little bit longer than that, but it's nowhere near as big. It's a sort of square tube that sits on the floor behind that cupboard there. And it has sat there for the last 2 years just working. It's absolutely fine. So that's proved extremely robust. But it does produce a scary amount of current. I have actually shorted it out on one occasion, and it produced a lot of melting of the screwdriver that shorted it out. So it didn't bother it at all. It's absolutely fine. It's well protected. So if you can source those, they're a really good power supply for it. Right, lessons learnt from this. Check the wiring. If you look on the left here, I built it and I thought, yeah, that's fine. Got the power connected, everything's there, the RF's connected, BIOS is connected. Let's just fire it up and see what happens. Anyway, I'll move forward. That's what happened. This was 250 quid, well, a bit more than that actually, of the initial BLF 188XR. And it's also advisable, probably if I'd done what radio hams never do and read the manual a bit more closely, I'd have realised that putting a current limiting resistor in when you first fire it up is quite a good idea. The reason this happened, if you look at the next, this is a completed, sorted out amplifier with a brand new BLF 188XR in it. Is this piece of wire here. I presumed that when you build when there's a printed circuit board supplying for the components to fit on, that the power would, once you connected the power to the board, it would be connected to the board. But there's an independent connection to each of the drains on the LDMOS. So if you don't connect that one and then you power it up, it goes into violent oscillation, draws a massive current, and actually blows this one apart. It blew the tab right off it. Such that I can't reuse it. It's beyond hope. Although I'm sure it still works. It doesn't, when you actually put a meter probe on there and check it, it seems okay. I managed to find another one from a company in Germany. Now, unfortunately, I've failed to find a link for that. If I do find it, I'll get David to put that one up as well, because they do provide a very good supply of these sort of LDMOSs and others at reasonable prices. And this one was £100 less than the one I'd bought off eBay, which seemed like quite a good price when I first got it. So, and I think they still do provide them quite cheaply.
Phil, if you don't mind, I know that you're going to be taking questions later, but for those who are not familiar with maybe construction things, you talk about this as an LDMOS device. Now, is that just a transistor essentially, or is it more than that?
It's basically a MOSFET, just designed for more power. I did this. If I flick back fast.
Okay. So I'll just explain. I'm just thinking of literally an M7, maybe just joining the hobby, doesn't know much about the electronic side. So a MOSFET or a FET stands for field effect transistor, and it's a type of transistor which is obviously at the heart and is a basic building block of most things, even if they've got lots of these things in. And so what we're talking about here with this LDMOS is something very big and beefy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just like it's basically a very big version of what you'd find in your normal
in your rig sort of
output stage of your rig, or even in the RF amp in your rig, you'd probably find something like this.
Forgive me for interrupting again, but I'm just thinking of viewers who don't know too much about the electronic side, and I just thought we should mention what this all is. Yeah,
so this is a laterally diffused metal oxide semiconductor. It's got a gain of around, the figures are here, 25 dBs or more on some frequencies. Certainly at 108 megahertz, 26.5 dBs gain. So it's an impressive device. And you don't need any extra driver stages in this, which is another bonus of these linears. Is they're quite a simple design. Let's go back to where we were, if I can find it. Right. Other ongoing issues. So the amplifier, as I initially made it, proved pretty good, perfect really, for search and pants QSOs. It'll run 400 watts of FT8 for 20 minutes. I hope you're not listening, Roger. Also, it'll do SSB or CW for a bit longer. But the trouble is, when it does overheat, if you go and you have a rag chew and then you keep having overs, it will eventually overheat. and not much longer than the 20 minutes, to be quite frank. And when it does go off, it takes about 30 seconds to cool down, which is a bit of a pain. So I improved it quite a lot by putting a fan on the top that goes down, and also by putting a baffle, as I said, a card baffle in the back, which directs much more of the fan output underneath the heatsink. And that has helped, but it is still an annoyance. I'm probably going to rebuild it at some stage in the future with a bigger heatsink on it. So that one really wasn't big enough. This was the cat, I think, trying to tell me that the initial design wasn't good. It was a cooling issue. So, and that's the current appearance. As you can see, I was quite cross with it, so I basically just ripped the front apart and took a hacksaw to it. So I'm afraid it's not the most, and a drill. It's not the most even, but it is a lot better since I did that. Anyway, so as I say, this is actually, despite the issues and all the rest of it, it's really proved very successful and has done wonders for my scores in the 2 meters. I mean, the other one, the one on Tuesday night, I got 56 contacts in it, and the conditions weren't particularly good. So it's definitely helping. And so anyway, I thought, right, onwards and upwards. With lessons learnt. So last year I decided I was going to improve my 70 centimeters ability as well. So the 2 meter amp had proved really rugged. It was, I'd accidentally, as I do, I'm very batty really, but I've run it into short circuit, I've run it into open circuit, accidentally put the full 50 watts into it while it was open circuit. It absolutely just doesn't. It sucks it up. It doesn't bother it at all. It's perfectly happy and it works fine. And it's been remarkably good. Once that LDMOS is properly in circuit, it's rugged as anything. The only thing they really don't like is being overdriven. But I can't overdrive it with the 991 because of the attenuator is perfect for 50 watts. Anyway, right. So I used the same box with a larger heatsink, and I changed the airflow by mounting the heatsink on its side and run the air in at the back and out of the sides at the back. So it sort of pushes it onto the heatsink and then it squirts out the sides. That works. I also decided that I didn't need such an extreme LDMOS, so I went for a 700 watt one next, which is this one. It's the BLF. It's still a BLF. It's the 184 XR. You may remember the previous one was the 188 XR. This one also has quite a good gain. It's sort of roughly 23, 24 dBs, and again, it'll run all day at 400 watts. The actual, the chip, well, anyway. The palette and board and dimensions and so on are very similar to the BLF 188 board. Same copper spreader, same PCB, just slightly different coil arrangement on it, as you can see there. So that was the 70 centimeter palette. As you can see, the arrangement's slightly different. I also bought a much more upmarket output relay for it. I still used one of the cheaper relays for the input, but on the output I used a proper industrial standard RF switch, UHF relay. That has helped a lot. The reason that resistor's there is to drop the 50 volts down to roughly 28 volts for the relay. As you can see, the whole thing's mounted on its side here, and this is the filter board, which is strapped on, which is actually screwed into the heatsink with the coils running along in the gap behind there. That seems to be fine, quite happy there. It also keeps the filter board nice and cool because it's in the airflow from the fans. This is the compartment containing another of those controller boards. That there is actually a dropping shunt for the meter. The thing was that when whatever I did with this, the current sensing side of the digital ammeter, it was just reading rubbish. It was all over the place. Wouldn't settle at all, and it was the RF getting into it. It's the only thing that seems to be affected. The rest of it's absolutely fine. But what I did was put a bit of tape across the amp section of it and disconnected it anyway. I left the voltage section showing, so that was fine. And then connected this ordinary analog meter, and that works fine for current. But say nothing spectacular. This one has proved a lot better at handling the power. It doesn't overheat nearly so much, and overall I'm pretty happy with that. It does. I mean, it will overheat if you run it forever at full power, and it's got protection in like the other one has, so it basically just shuts down. It's designed to switch off at about 60 degrees centigrade, which is really what's recommended for protecting the LD MOS. Although, on a short basis, it can stand soldering at much higher temperatures. I've always been a little bit skeptical about that 60-degree recommendation, but that's what I've done just to, as that's what's recommended. I'm being nice to it. Okay, let's just see whether there's anything else I've missed telling you about. Yeah, no, I think we've said everything there. I'll move on.
Can I just ask, is that the same power supply that you used to feed that?
Yeah, this is the same power supply. I just unplug it from the 1 amp and plug it into this one.
Right.
I never leave them all connected up at once. I haven't got the bench space for one thing. So this is, again, it's the same configuration with the fans at the back. The sockets are for PTT and ALC are down here, but these two aren't in use yet. But they're intended to be used for they were meant to have a 12-volt out and also to have a LNA switching, but at the moment I've not got an LNA for 70 centimeters, so I haven't bothered with the switching in there yet. That's a thing for the future. As you can see, the air comes out of the sides here and goes in the back there, and there's another grill like that on the other side. And that cooling arrangement seems to work an awful lot better than the other amp. So there's a front view of it. Right, so I mean that's really that one. And then the final thing was right at the end of 2020. I thought, well, this is working so well, and then the scores were going up on 70 centimeters as well, and people were starting to beam this way and realised that there was life in J002. So I decided, well, 6 meters and 4 meters, why not? Now, the good thing about 6 and 4 meters is that you can use the same amp and the same low-pass filter because the harmonics work out nicely. It's not a problem. So the linears for 2 and 70 dramatically help the scores. Gordon, G3PXT, was aware I was looking to build this amp and spotted a kit for sale. I think it was on the G3CWI site. It's called the A600, and this uses two sort of a pair of lower power MOSFETs, 300 watt MRF 300s. So they do a complementary pair, and I'll show you what I mean by that. The guy who bought the kit didn't build it because he didn't fancy doing the surface mount devices, but as I've said, it isn't really a great problem. So it was built in a much larger box, as you can see. The only circuitry I used from the W6PQL site this time was the low pass filter. That's been fine, and I used a low pass filter set at just above 70 megahertz, so that it would work. It does work on both bands, as I said. Right. So sorry, the pinouts on the MRF 300 device are a reflection of each other, so they can sit nicely opposite each other on the palette, and you've got the input one side and the output the other side. So they do an A and B version, which have the pinouts reversed. I'm just trying to do this without changing. Here we go. Right. Also, I sourced a relay board that goes with the A600 kit. It's got some interesting features. One of them is it has all the temperature control monitoring and SWR monitoring and so on built into it, which is useful. It also has a 12-volt supply built into it. Now, this came as a kit, and all surface mount components and stuff again, so there was a fair bit of that. But it did provide everything needed really, and it's really just a question of wiring it all up, having built it. So what I use it with the 991A with 40 watts of drive. There's a small attenuator on the input. I'm trying to think. I think it's 6 dB. So with 40 watts of drive, I get 400 watts out on 6 meters, and very, very serendipitously, if I stick my the 10 watts from my Ukrainian-bought 70 megahertz transverter into it, I get 160 watts out, which is the legal limit on 4. So that's been very handy. I used a much larger heatsink in this one than I'd used on the other devices, on the other amps, and a single large quiet fan with flow along the vanes from the right side of the amplifier to the left side. This one only very rarely overheats. It needs real abuse before it overheats. So this one actually, I seem to have solved the problem with that completely. These are the devices. As you can see, the A has gate, source and drain, and the B has drain, source and gate. So if you put them opposite each other on the board, they feed through nicely. But they're not like they're not as rugged as the other LD Mosses, and I have managed to blow these up by overdriving it accidentally with 15 meters, which was very stupid. But anyway, but they are again incredibly simple to replace. The way they sit in the amplifier, they're right on top, and you just got to unbolt them, unsolder them, and stick them back in again. So that was the case I used. That came from Radio Spares. It's not quite as wide, but it's sort of it's deeper and taller than the other one. That's the pallet and the kit for the pallet. As you can, these are the two devices sitting opposite each other. That isn't the one I made. That's just a stock photo of them, but mine does look very similar, having been made up. But the heat sinking isn't done like this, slightly differently. Yes, much more crude, really. So this is the air outlet, and that's the air inlet with the fan. And the power connector again, same one as I've used on the other amps. Literally just unplug one amp and plug the other one in. So the front panel, I used another meter like that, so it was quite an easy thing to do. Didn't bother monitoring the voltage because, to be quite frank, it's 50 volts and it never changes, even under full load. Again, the reverse power and forward power metering, and on-off enables the PTT, and then this has two antenna sockets on this board, which is really quite useful. I can put my 4 meter vertical into one and the 6 and 4 meter beam in the other, and I've got switching between vertical and horizontal for 4 meters anyway, which is quite useful. The lights show when the power is onto the device, when it's overheated, if the SWR is too high, and TXRX switching. That's for a remote control of the amp, which I've not tried using yet, and that's my PTT input. I did use a mains fan on it originally, and that horrible mess with a bit of tape over it is where I had a mains socket on the back for powering the fan, but that's not proven necessary, I'm pleased to say. Has it been worthwhile? Yes. Higher scores in the UKACs. People are hearing me who aren't beamed in the right direction, and they generally swing round and have a go, or most of them do. So obviously more contacts generally, and a greater satisfaction with VHF and UHF activity. It's made it much more enjoyable, really. The future, collecting parts towards a masthead PA. Well, since that was a few weeks ago I wrote this, and the masthead PA is now built. This is a 30 watt maximum device, which I've just literally finished today with the help of a G3SGC over in Seapooling, who's got the meter, the measuring equipment to check it out, and that's producing a fairly healthy sort of about 20 watts really reliably. But I've yet to finish it in terms of waterproofing and getting it up on the masthead and so on. But it's got RF sensing in it, which I knocked up a little circuit for, and extra PCB to stick it on and so on. So that all works quite nicely. It used a little Mitsubishi module. Anyway, that's where we are at the moment.
Good. Well, there's a project or two or three or four. In fact, there are three, aren't there? Just because you've just covered that, the masthead amp. How are you going to waterproof that? Because I mean, there's quite a lot to that. There was quite a large amount of metal and heatsink. How would you go about thinking about making that waterproof? Right.
I shall show it to you again. So it's an ordinary die-cast box with a heatsink on it. So once you've got the case on, all you've got to do, if I can get it, there we are, that's better. I've just got to seal around the edges with mastic. These I've already sealed with rubber, that self-amalgamating tape.
Mm-hmm.
I put that underneath it when I put it together, and so it's all squeezed in there, and those are waterproof already. This is a waterproof connector you can use. I got that off eBay, but it's for connecting mains cables together, and it'll handle the current, and it comes with washer. So over there, there's a I've got it lying around somewhere. Basically, it's got a sealing thing that goes round the cable and tightens up and onto the cable, and then that's waterproof. So I'm going to be running 12 volts up the mast. That will come from one of these power supplies. Sorry, I keep forgetting where the camera is. One of these power supplies, which is another HP one, and that's producing 13.5 volts roughly from the mains. And I've got that in a box at the bottom of the waterproof box at the bottom of the tower already, with the mains running here, so I can switch it on from here. Did you say 12 volts at the tower?
And did you say where those power supplies came from? Was it eBay?
Yeah, they came off eBay as well. They were £9 a pair,
wow.
not guaranteed to work. And I've got two perfectly good 12 volt at 38 amp power supplies. They're tiny for 38 amps as well.
Yes, I mean that's extraordinary. I was working out when you said about the 50 volts, 50 amp ones. That's 2,500 watts, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's without the 12 volt bit.
I wouldn't want to make that.
No, I wouldn't.
In fact, I don't think I want to be in the same room when I plug something in that
I've been quite nervous of it, but it just sits down there purring away to itself, and it doesn't cause any trouble.
No. Excuse me. Well, of course, they'll be designed to be very reliable and, it's being server power supplies. Exactly. Now, we've got a few questions for you, and I'll read those to you in a moment. But this is a good time if you're watching this at home and you've got some questions for Phil. Please ask away now, either on BATC or Facebook, and I'll read them to him. So the first question comes from Julian, 2E0DJR, and says, what's the average cost of making one of these? So should we take the 2 metre one first? Yeah,
so the 2 metre one, I did cost it out in the end, and it came to just over £600. And that was including the broken LDMOS.
Which was 200 and something, wasn't it?
Well, it was an extra 170 when I bought the next one. Yeah.
Okay. So most people hopefully wouldn't need that extra one. So
no. Well, no, hopefully if they follow my advice and use a current limiting resistor in the power supply when they first fire it up, just to check there aren't any wiring faults. Yeah.
Okay.
So once you've got it wired up properly, it's very robust and you're not going to break it.
Thank you. Ray, good to see him. G3XLG says, I'm pretty sure Phil has an HF amp, but I wonder if it was a commercial piece of equipment or another homebrew.
The HF amp, I'm afraid, I'm very sorry to say, hang on, is, where is it? There, under Jim, there. It's an ACOM 2000A.
Okay.
It came from just after I came here, actually, from a NARC silent key sale. It was Ricky's amplifier.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We haven't got any other questions at the moment coming in, but this is a good time to ask them now, please. I'm going to ask you a question now because I know, I think you're sort of retired or whatever now. So roughly how long did it take you to build the first one, the 2 metre one?
Right, I was thinking about this. It depends where you start from. From getting the bits together and it took quite a while. But can you say I was researching it, and I didn't know anything about it. I was completely clueless when I started, and so I had to do a lot of researching around, a lot of browsing the internet, and a lot of searching for components. And also, I asked for some of them for Christmas. Would you believe?
No.
So it was. I suppose in total that took about 3 months. But actually, from when I got the bits together and built it, it was about another 6 weeks.
And you mentioned that Steve S.A.D. helped you with the milling. But if you don't have a friend with a milling machine and things like that,
you could drill and file it yourself.
You can you?
Yeah, you do need to make that groove. If you don't do that, the heat transfer will be a problem.
I think, if I may, I'm just thinking of the absolute beginners in all this electronics and wondering what this is really all about. So you talked about the efficiency of these devices. Not great. I think you said sort of 50% or so. So what that, again, to go into real basics for somebody starting, it means that for every 100 watts, say, you put into this thing, only 50 watts of it is going to come out in radio frequency, which is what you want, roughly.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to explain the basics of it, so that other 50 watts, because you can't destroy and lose energy, so it has to turn into something else, and it turns into heat, doesn't it?
It turns into heat, which you've got to clear off with the heat sink and the fans. Yes.
So that's why
the other thing is that not all the radio energy that comes out of it, as I was saying, is on the frequency you want. There's with this, they're quite harsh. They produce quite a lot of harmonics, and that's why you need the low pass filter. But of course, that even the filter gets quite warm when it's running at high power, because it's filtering out the harmonics, and that comes out as heat as well. So your overall efficiency is probably only about 35-40%, I guess.
That's fairly low down there, isn't it? In terms of a lot of heat to get rid of it, especially
there's a lot of current. There's an awful lot of current goes into it to get 400 watts out of the end.
Yes, I'm sure. Hence your 50 volt power supply.
Yes.
Of course, a bit of a domestic. You'll be sorry to learn, I'm sure, with Sonny M0SYW, because he says that Charlotte says, I thought this was about beer. Sonny has tricked me. I think that's referring to the homebrew bit.
Oh, yes, yeah. Sorry about that.
I must admit, in my introduction there, I did turn that homebrew to homemade, because I'm not sure that everybody would understand what homebrew meant. So, well, we've got any other questions at the moment? I mean, do you think this is a good thing to start with if you're just starting in the construction side of the hobby, or would you start something a bit simpler?
I think it depends on. I think you probably need to have built a few simpler things in the past and have an idea what you're doing. It's not. There were some extra bits of circuitry I had to design in. I had to work out the switching, and it's not totally straightforward. So I would have said it's a sort of medium project, really. If you discount the surface mount stuff, which scares a lot of people, but you don't need to be scared of it. As I say, if you use solder paste, it's dead easy.
Yeah, actually, if I may here, I'll put a bit of a plug in for something. If some of you may have seen the RSGB convention that was earlier in October, and one of the videos on the introduction to stream is something that we hosted, and there was an excellent video by Dan M0WT talking about all aspects of soldering, starting with the very basics of just conventional components, right through to surface mount chips with 30 or 40 pins. I think what I'll do is I'll put a link to that video, because it's all up there now, on the newsletter, along with your links as well, because if you have been frightened of soldering surface mount, not really sure how it works, it was a really good video. They're very close up videos of how you do that, and how you use solder paste, and how you use flux in the right way as well, so that might help as well. So if this was a bit of a medium project, if someone's just thinking, oh yes, I'd really love to make something, where would you suggest they start from the absolute beginning? Maybe they can just about solder. What would you? Because you've obviously been a constructor for some time and you enjoy it. How would you get people started?
I mean, I started out with valves, and I made a very simple valve television when I was 12. So it goes back a long way, and there's a huge gap in the middle where I've missed out on things. You see, which is why this was quite a learning project. Where to start? I think start by just trying to make a simple radio receiver. Using a couple of transistors. Then build up from there. I think it's once you get the hang of soldering, and the hang of the fact that things do work and you just hook them together, it's you get your confidence up and you can move on to things like this. Yeah.
And they're less likely to go bang, and they're less likely to be as expensive as
do
well, I guess.
Do something low power first, definitely. I'd say this went bang with me in a big way. It was quite exciting, actually. Really.
What did Alison say? Did she use the word exciting when she heard the bang or not?
I think she was out when it went bang.
I love it. Yeah. I think Tammy would be out if she thought I was experimenting with something with 2,500 watt power supply. I've got a question now from Mike G4DYC. He says, great presentation, Phil. Have you any thoughts on an HF solid state amp
yes.
project?
Yes. That A600 amp can be used. It was actually designed originally for HF. And so it will work from top band right the way up. And in fact, 70 megahertz is probably at the extreme upper end of where it's designed to work. So the A600, but you'd have to design in some switchable filters and things. But yeah, that's a good one. It's quite simple.
Yeah, and it is nice for people. I mean, we're now getting some nice encouraging comments and things for people, because I know that if you were just starting in construction, or maybe you haven't been even licensed long, you've got your M7 maybe, and this is all going to seem a bit daunting and big and complex, but actually you can start with simpler things.
You probably wouldn't want a 400 watt amp as an M7 anyway.
Well, you shouldn't really have a 400 watt amp, but Julian 2E0DJR says, in fact, said that a crystal set he made at 10 years old was great. I must admit, some of the projects that we've done with Bright Sparks and Scouts over the years as well, and you give them something, a simple kit to make, and you suddenly see their eyes light up, literally, when they hear that first signal in their ear or something like that. There's still some magic there, isn't there? I think even...
I well remember my first valve receiver. It used a DAF 91 battery valve, and it just one, the tune circuit, and I think it was super regenerative. And it picked up Radio 1, and I was dancing away to it, and then of course everything shorted out, and there was a big bang. But it was wonderful. It really was. It was a great start.
There's a theme going on here, Phil.
I was about 7 at the time.
Oh, 7! Oh, wonderful. Yeah. No, I love playing around with electronics and stuff then as well. Got a couple of other comments where Sonny's come back and said, yeah, I'll order one of those as well. It must be the next project, Phil. Now from M0JGX, does the masthead amp require a breather vent to prevent capillary moisture condensation intake?
Who knows? Sorry, I am very, very new at this, and I'm sure I'll find out. I was intending to drill a small hole in the bottom of it, so yes.
Well, that would be a good idea, I guess. Does that mean... Sorry? I was going to say, does that mean as for build-ups of moisture and things to give it somewhere to go? Or
yes, yeah.
I guess as well the fact that you've got a heatsink on there, it's going to get quite warm, and that will help evaporate some of the...
Interestingly, I say we were running it up today over at Graham's place, and it was literally not getting very warm at all. I think it was hitting about 28 degrees. It running full power for a while.
Oh, that's all right.
The heatsink seems to be more than adequate, and it'll be up in the wind. Of course, it'll be up in the sun as well. That's the other thing.
Yes, at other times of year, yeah, maybe. Mark Tuttle, GA0TMT, has said start by making a regenerative receiver would be his suggestion. Of course, Mark's really into construction, as you know.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So good suggestions there. We'll have a look and see what other kits and things are available, maybe. Phil G6AIO says, my first... Oh, we've just lost that one, sorry. It's good to see all the feedback here. My first... here we go. I think sorry about that. My first was a hybrid audio amp with OC70s in the preamp and valves for the output stages. OC70s, I remember they're the little black ones which you could scrape the paint off and turn them into photo
some in the shed. Yeah, I've still got some in the shed, and the OC44s for RF.
Yeah, I remember those as well. Yeah, germanium transistors, weren't they?
And they made them with where they'd scrape the case covering off, so they were clear and they worked as photo transistors as well.
Absolutely, I remember those days. They were lovely. Much cheaper than the OCP71, which had a little lens at the end and cost about 10 times as much. I seem to remember.
Didn't work any better.
No, that's right. I remember that. Oh, I know this is a bit of a natter now, but we can. But didn't you find that when you were using those sometimes, you'd scrape the paint off and find that instead of a clear sort of silicon stuff around it, it was white, and then they didn't work as well.
That's true. Yeah.
So we have got the same upbringings, I'm sure, and the same sort of thing. But they are wonderful things to experiment with. And I mean, when we've been meeting in normal times, you know, and we will get back to meeting at normal times, I've tried to encourage people to have a go at construction, because it is an art which, you know, it is such a wonderfully rewarding part of the hobby, isn't it?
And one of the things that used to be around that really got me into construction to a degree was the S deck and the T deck. Do you remember those?
Yeah,
things?
I do. The white, the base
plug
things.
your components in, and you could make things. I used to make up sort of multivibrators and audio synthesizers and so on with them. So,
well, there are similar things now. They call them generically, I think, just call them breadboards, Phil, and they've just got lots of pins. I mean, the S decks, I seem to remember, had pitches suitable for resistors and capacitors and things like that, with little front panels. But there's similar sorts of things available. I really hope that we've encouraged a few people tonight and inspired a few people, and also, you know, that when we do start meeting again as well, we can get people making stuff, because there's, apart from anything else, I'm sure that although £600 is a lot of money for something that you build yourself,
a lot less than you'd pay for the made-up amp.
Absolutely, that's what I was going to say. You know, so there is a benefit there too. Julian said we'll do more antenna days when we can get back together again. I think there's another message there that I might just have missed, and said the first mystery antenna first contact was Brazil. I didn't think it would work at all. What a surprise. That was his first HF antenna. And Rodney G0CBO says suggestions for a Wednesday: construct a simple kit live and show how easy it could be, including testing live. That's a good thing. We could do it interactively. I could put one in my little drawer here and pull it out. And no, but it would be a good thing. I'm sure I'll reveal something that we don't normally tell you what's happening on the next NARC Live until the week before. But in 2 weeks' time, I think it is. Yes, 2 weeks' time, we've got Tony G0MQG is coming here to show us a bit more fault finding and testing. We did this last year, and he's going to come and do that. And we've got lots of cameras and close-up cameras and things we can show of things like that. So if that's something that interests you and you'd like to see us do a project, and you or indeed better still, you could do a project, then that's something we could certainly look at for a future NARC Live. I think you'd have a go at it. You did make something once, didn't you, Tammy? I think. Yeah, anyway. Right, we're nearly, I think, coming towards the end now. Ray G3XLG has just come back and said Walford Electronics limited supply kits for beginners, intermediates and advanced, worth looking at. Very good point, Ray. And there's some other little I'm trying to think of the other ones off the top of my head. Some of the other companies that advertise in Practical Wireless and in Radcom. I can't think of them, but there are some basic kits which are good ways to start with everything inside them. You don't need to do any machining of cases and milling and that sort of thing as well. We'll try and put a few bits and pieces together on the newsletter as well as all those links, Phil, for all those things that you've done there. GU6EFB has come back and said, look up the vent plug from CPC for a box breather. So there's a suggestion for you, for your
I will write that down.
CPC, yep. A box breather. So I think that's something that probably won't let too much moisture in, but let a bit of air out. And now, Kanga, there we go. Great. Andy M0NKR says Kanga kits. That was the one I was trying to think of. And Neil Bowers has said Velleman kits as well. They're, I think, and they used to be available from Maplin, but I think Rapid Electronics now do them. Just to give you a few names at home, and I would say I'll try and do this because I'm very keen on construction and electronics myself. But a company like Rapid Electronics is very good for lots of range of components. Now we don't have a retailer like Maplin around. JPR Electronics is another one. But Rapid have a huge range of cases, everything from cases to resistors, capacitors, and everything else. But anyway, I think we've run out of questions there. But what an evening! We've started off with these massive sort of linears and things, and you've now started lots of people thinking about construction, Phil. We're really grateful to you for sharing all of that with us. As I'd be very surprised if we haven't inspired quite a few people to now give it a go. And we'll put all those links, as I said, for the kits and things that you've used to make those on the web. And thank you very much for stepping forward. This is we do try and get some club members as well as other guests from other places, and it's really good of you to come forward and do this presentation for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There we are. Thank you very much to Phil, and we're almost there at the end of this NARC Live. So just to remind you again what's happening next week on the club at 7 o'clock on Sunday. It's the GB 2RS News on GB3MB repeater. Monday 8th of November. It's the Monday Night Net at 7:30 with Ken M0KJW, and at 8:30 the 80-metre CW Net. And next Wednesday, the 10th of November here, it's an ICNIRP special because it's here. It seems like ages ago that we talked about it, and but now it's just around the corner. So if you run 110 megs or above, you really need to assess that. Look at the details in your license. If you've got some experience of that, and you've, good or bad, from calculating how your antennas might radiate, we'd love to hear from you next week. If you are worried about it and it's only just over a week ago and you want to know what to, a week away, sorry, and you want to know more what to do, that's also for you. So it's an interactive next Wednesday for NARC Live on that. And don't forget to let us know, and let's have your stories and your pictures and everything else to keep in touch. But I think for now, that's it from Tammy M0TC.
Goodbye.
And from me, David G7ERP. Take care. See you next week. Bye-bye.